This morning, we're talking about dementia, and more specifically, how you can lower your risk of being diagnosed with it. Here in Canada, nearly 452,000 people over the age of 65 are living with dementia, and those numbers are on the rise. And while we can't control some risk factors, like aging and genetics, there are plenty of things that we can do to keep dementia at bay. And to share some of those is Jay Ingram, who is working with the Public Health Agency of Canada to spread the word. Good morning to you. Nice to see you, Jay.
Good morning to you. I can't wait for the Nickelback exhibit at the National Music Center.
You and I could go take a look at that together. I'm glad you're here today. I want to talk about some of the risk factors around dementia. There are two different types, non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors.
Right.
What are the non-modifiable risk factors?
Well, as you suggested, the two most important are genetics, although I should caution people by saying that if you had a parent or an aunt or a grandparent or something like that, that doesn't really mean you're at much higher risk. There's a possibility, but genetics isn't the whole story. Aging, of course, is the inevitable non-modifiable factor, just because dementia is more common as you get older. But I would say those are the two major ones.
You know, I think for a long time, for people, it was a foregone conclusion that if you had those two factors in place, that was your diagnosis. But there's good news here. There are modifiable risk factors. These are things that are in our control. There's a list of 12 of them, in fact, and we don't have time to go through all 12, but we've got three here that we'd love to look into. One is hearing loss. The second is alcohol consumption and traumatic brain injury. Let's start with hearing loss.
So I have hearing loss, and I wear hearing aids, and the good news is, for a very short, or for a time, it was thought that maybe hearing loss is just the first step in dementia and there wasn't anything you could do about it. But it now looks pretty clear that hearing aids do lower the risk, and it's a substantial risk. So I say two things to people. Before you have hearing loss, protect your ears. If you're in that garage band you were talking about, anywhere, if you're in a setting where there's loud noise, industrial noise, do wear earplugs, because it's really significant. After, get hearing aids, or closed captioning when you're watching TV, because the issue seems to be that with hearing loss you lose social contact, and losing social contact is one of the risks for dementia, especially later in life. So yeah, those are things that you should try and take care of if possible.
I'm glad you explained the correlation. That was my next question. What about excessive alcohol consumption and the third one on the list that we mentioned, traumatic brain injury?
Yeah, so as every Canadian knows, the limits on what you should be or should not be drinking are in flux. They changed about a month ago. I would say that just be reasonable about alcohol consumption. And, if you're a beer drinker, for instance, try non-alcoholic beer. I mean, the selection is fantastic. I'm not, a sponsor of them, but the selection is good enough that you can still enjoy your beer and not take in as much alcohol. So that's a big deal. Traumatic brain injury, I think people kind of instinctively know what they should or shouldn't be doing. If you're doing hazardous sports, for instance, wear protective gear like a helmet. But one thing that a lot of Canadians overlook is, the streets in Calgary right now are pretty slippery, and thousands of people slip and fall on the ice, injure themselves. That's every year, I'm saying. And many of those injuries are brain injuries. And, there are mild traumatic brain injuries. A slight concussion would fall into that category. But there are obviously more serious ones like skull fractures. So this is a preventive issue. Just be careful that when you're in some sort of potentially hazardous situation where you could suffer a brain injury, then be careful. I wear cleats, those things you can strap onto the bottom of your boots when I'm walking, even on city streets, because a fall on the ice can be pretty bad.
Jay, I know we've only scratched the surface of this topic of conversation. We definitely want to have you back to learn more. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.